by Raila Odinga and William Ruto, it's exactly the same, more of the same. It's not going to change the trajectory that the country has taken so far. Well, that's why voters have checked out. I'm basically saying, what's the difference?
Well, at least Wajakoya has some radical 10 points, and we'll talk about them in a while. But Wanjiru, I wonder what your initial thoughts are about this debate.
It is important, and listening to the concerns that are being brought forward by Wajakoya, by Honorable Raila Odinga, my question from a public participation point of view is, as the media platform is created, is there usually a discussion with the political actors? Because if there isn't, there could be next time. I think there are a lot of Kenyans there that would have loved to see a debate with all the presidential candidates. So public participation and stakeholder engagement, I think, applies across the board. But given that we're here, I agree totally with what Sheila is saying, that we expect our leaders to be humble enough to avail themselves, to field, to sell their proposals to the public. But I think the missing link, and my question as we engage in this very, this event is it too little too late? Because we have a situation where we have an administration that hasn't undertaken or supported public participation, hasn't supported civic education, hasn't supported voter education. And so even as the media strives to put together this platform, is it too little too late? And how do we ensure accountability? Because it's one thing to have manifestos, and I don't agree quite with the professor. I think the manifestos has some very good proposals that, if implemented, can transform some of the big issues that bedevil us.
Well, he's saying they are more of the same.
Well, I don't agree with that in terms of substance, but what I do, the question is, where is the accountability? After the promise, how do we ensure implementation? Because we are seeing challenges on leadership and integrity even going into the campaign. We are seeing violations of the basic tenets of the law in the way the political parties have constituted themselves. So the challenge to me is, yes, it's good to have these platforms. We need to have them consistently across the board, not just before the major election, but annually we should have an accountability forum, asking the questions, asking the president.
But I've heard at least the organizers of the debate, say that the culture is picking up. I mean, you look at different neighborhoods, people are hosting candidates for MCA and different groups, whether it's religious groups, whether it is civil society people. There is this demand of the people who are, seeking different offices to come before the people and explain themselves.
It's not just when politicians are seeking votes that they need to
two gentlemen bring to the table, but I think there's an issue here, a national issue that all of us have seen play out with regard to where we are in terms of the preparations for this election that is now just 13 days away, and we've seen some back and forth between IEBC and DCI, for example. I wonder around this table how that makes us feel, and I'll start with you, Houghton.
Although we're probably not the best people to start with. As Amnesty, we don't do very much in terms of election oversight. But let me just give you a couple of thoughts. One is that, we have to keep in mind that public trust and credibility of institutions at a time like this is just so important. To have two independent institutions, the National Police Service / Director of Criminal Investigations and the Electoral Commission, scrapping in public.
All right, I'm always interrupting you because the other candidate, the Agano presidential candidate, is arriving there, David Wahiga Maure, and I'll go straight to Lulu Hassan, who is going to be speaking to him in a short while.
Na barabara kabisa, mpenzi mtazamaji, shukran sana Joe Ageyo. Kama mnavyoona tayari David Wahiga Mwaure tayari kishawasili wa chama cha Agano akiwa na mgombea mwenza.
All right, that does seem that we're having a bit of a signal problem there, but yes, the gentleman you just saw there is the Agano presidential candidate, that is David Wahiga Mwaure, who is going to be taking part in this debate. And I just want to continue with that, getting some quick thoughts around this whole thing of what's really happening with the IBC, and I think maybe I go to Dennis.
I don't know. I've always been worried about IBC preparedness. There are no good signs. We're not seeing good signs. I don't want to be dramatic, but I wonder what these good signs mean in terms of the fate of the election itself, because it seems to be going worse. 2013, we were here. 2017, it got worse. Now we're 2022, it's even worse. It's just not prepared. And
but what's really the problem, according to you?
From a technical perspective, I think there's a way in which organization is not being done. The procurement is not being done well. We don't have the audit report from KPMG. We're not sure about ballot papers. Ballot papers are coming before Gazette notices are
okay,
issued.
Dennis, I'm sorry. We have to go back, and I think we are now ready with the Agano presidential candidate, Wahiga Mwaure.
Na barabara kabisa, mtazamaji, kama mnavyoona David Wahiga Mwaure tayari wa Agano Party kisha wasili kwa mjadala ambao umesubiriwa kwa hamu na gamu. Labda nimuulize mawili matatu kuhusiana na mjadala wa siku hii ya leo. Karibu sana David.
Asante sana dadangu.
Naam, umejitayarisha vipi siku hii ya leo?
Nimejitayarisha kabisa ili nikuje niwaeleze wa Kenya sababu gani ni lazima safari tubadilishe na sababu gani ni lazima wachague mtu mpya na yeye ndiye mimi. Tunakuja kuelewa kwamba hii ni miaka 59 kutoka wakati tulipata uhuru. Tumekuwa na tabu nyingi hata baada ya miaka hiyo yote. Na sisi wengine kama mimi nimeingia katika huu uchaguzi kwa sababu naamini ni wakati wa kufagia na kuleta wapya. Na kwamba kila ndoto ya yeyote, hata wewe ambaye huja kuwemo huko ndani, hujulikani, hujuna pesa nyingi ama mahelikopta, unaweza kuwa rais kama vile dada yetu Rupita alivyotuambia kila ndoto ni valid.
Na unahisi vipi kuhusiana na mjadala wetu siku hii ya leo? Unahisi vipi? Hisia zako ni gani?
Mimi kwanza nina furaha kwa sababu ni haki ya Wakenya kutusikia zote. Na natarajia hata kukutana na mgombea yule mwingine, my competitor, na hata wale wengine nawaambia wakuje ili Wakenya waelewe. Na mimi kile nafurahia ni ya kwamba yale tumekuwa tukiona kule nje, wakati mwingine hata watu hawasikizi sera ni gani. Wanaangalia magari, wanaangalia vipi, mapambo, lakini leo ni wakati wa kusikiza hasa ni nani anaweza kubadilisha maisha yako.
Okay, shukran sana.
Asante na shukuru.
Okay. Ndio hivyo tumeweza kumsikia David Wahiga Mwaure akisema kwamba ataeleza sera zake kwa upana zaidi, akitumai kwamba yule mgombea mwenzake ambaye ni mpinzani wake wa Jakoya atakuwa yuko naye katika jukwaa lile. Ni mambo ambayo tunasubiri kuona mtazamaji, lakini kwa hivi sasa moja kwa moja na kurudisha kwake Joe Ageyo endelee na wachanganuzi.
Shukran Lulu Hassan. So the Agano presidential candidate is in the house, and we will have to wait for that because the two platforms couldn't be more different. But we were talking about the IEBC preparedness and the back and forth we are seeing with the DCI. Dennis, I don't know if you had finished your thought.
No, for me, it's not the management problem. I think IEBC now presents for us a political and an economic risk.
Wow, that is big. What are you talking about?
It is. The uncertainty behind all these preparations, it's no longer about management and procurement. We're now talking about, are we going to have an election? Are we going to have an election that is successfully executed? Are we going to have an election that is not disputed? These are now political and economic risks. I think that's where we are.
Prof?
So, Joe, this is a historical problem. This is not just IEBC. The previous electoral bodies have had these same levels of institutionalized and government engineering competence because of what elections mean to our governance process. We've not had free and fair elections since 1992. This is not a disputable fact. I think the only credible election we had that we believe the outcome was 2002. So what IBC exhibits today is a comedy of errors in many respects, and institutional incompetence at a colossal, catastrophic level. One scholar of governance called Land Pritchard talks about governance incapability, and talks about isomorphic mimicry, where we've created an institution that mimics that which should be a functional institution that runs election. In every sense it looks like, but it doesn't function like one. So I think that in many respects, if you look at the last 4 elections, we've created a system where IBC is kind of an arm of government that inserts itself in diverting and subverting the will of the people. Now that has created interesting opportunities for perpetrating internal incompetence, in the sense that IBC is just not well organized as an institution with all the capabilities that it needs to run an election. Internally, we talk about procurement issues. We talk about just an election, a plan of action that you would execute to the D-Day of an election. If you ask Chebukati what he's been doing for the last 3 years in preparation for this election, you know, the voter register, the cleaning up of all of that, talking about electoral materials, the ballot papers, the security around that. And as Dennis says, this is an existential risk to the democracy, and is also a threat to the body politic of the country in terms of our sovereignty in many respects.
Sheila.
Yes, we followed that keenly, and one of the things that we had urged IBC earlier on is in the spirit of open procurement, because we know the problem of procurement in this country. It is actually the center of corruption. Most corruption in this country emanates from public procurement. And so the interest that then the procurement of these strategic materials, the ballot papers, the technology has, it meant that there needed to be an attempt to ensure that there was open communication throughout, because when you're looking at some of the claims that were made, was it 3 weeks ago, coming from politicians, it comes from that whole organization of procurement. So my own take is that there should have been an attempt to be a bit more open, not a bit more, but actually very open in terms of communication, communicating with stakeholders, including the political class. But the other concern that I have is just the ability of our agencies to be able to work together. When you see that kind of spat between the police and IBC, and you wonder whether these are not some things that could have been resolved, you know, bilaterally. Yeah, we expect them to work together. An election, it requires that you're working very closely with security agencies. And I would have expected that kind of, you know, whether it's a misunderstanding or a dispute or whatever contention, should have been sought out, especially because we know how we easily sensationalize things around elections and politics, especially at this time. We're just 2 weeks to the elections. I would have expected that as a matter of national security, this is something that should have been handled. Of course, we of course, it's good that it's out in the open, so we know what issues are there. But then we also know that this is something that can potentially, you know, spark several disputes, you know, in regard to the election. And of course, I know the politicians are watching. It's probably a matter, if anyone is preparing the petition, it's already something
they are doing more than the watching. They're talking a lot as well.
Yes. So my concern, Joe, is how our institutions are working, not just the police and IBC, but throughout the planning of this entire election. I have had my concerns in terms of our institutions to be able to work in collaboration. Yeah. Even when you look at how candidates were verified, vetted and cleared, you could tell that clearly these institutions were not working together, and as a result of that, we now have people who are not credible, who don't meet the qualifications set out in the Constitution, who have been cleared for office. So this problem started earlier on in the election process.
Wow. It all sounds familiar, Wanjiru. Deja vu all over again?
Unfortunately, yes. This is a political problem, because the IBC is really, if you look at our democratic trajectory as Irongo was taking us, you know, from the very start, we are trying to build a constitutional democracy, and we are trying to ensure that our governance is guided by the rule of law. That is where we are heading, and we are coming from a context where we had, an authoritarian, very corrupt regime through the 80s, through the 90s, and we are trying to reform this with the Constitution of Kenya. And the IBC continues to be possibly our weakest link in our democratic process. And I would say this is a political problem, because the IBC was not fully constituted until very recently,
last year, yes.
Until last year, and that was a failure on the part of, you would say, it's the political leadership. It's the government of the day, you would say, because having the majority of numbers in the House, having even through the handshake, the government, the administration had the wherewithal to be able to constitute IBC adequately. Another factor with IBC we continue to hear is the budget. That they do not get the allocations they need in terms of the budget. We also know there's a lot of horse trading and a lot of efforts to kind of influence. Of course, the way the IBC is designed, political parties have a role in terms of the nominations of the constitution of the commissioners, but we then don't see the independence, and we get a sense there's a lot of interference happening behind the scenes. So the inability of IBC to win the public trust, and the fear that it may, not perform to the level that's needed, is a political problem. And then we ask ourselves, we've had several by-elections run by the very IBC, we now see, as the stakes get very high, this IBC is not able to, the institutions aren't working together.
All right, we need to go. I think yes, there is that is Professor Wajakoya, the Roots presidential candidate. I'm not quite sure what he wants to say, but there he is outside. We'll just take you there and hear what he's talking about. All right, so we will keep that there as we monitor what that is about. But here with my panel, we are monitoring this together. And Prof, I see you are quite perplexed, perhaps amused by what's going on.
No, Dennis just remarked that Wajakoya is probably standing next to his lawyer, so I'm wondering whether he's going to sue the organizers of the presidential
So we have to be careful what we say here, but we have to monitor what that's about as we continue. But I want us to talk a little bit about these two gentlemen and what they have placed on the table. And it is interesting, we're watching Wajakoya just now, and he has this thing that he calls a 10-point manifesto that has all kinds of things there. There is cannabis that has taken the country by storm, the whole conversation, and he has some people call it ganjanomics, because he has all these figures around it, and he has things like hanging the corrupt, he has things like shutting down the SGR, suspending the constitution, and selling all manner of body parts of hyenas and related things. I wonder what the thinking is, first overall, what his approach has been, Dennis, to this campaign, Professor Wajakoya.
I think for me, actually looking at all the manifestos, I think for me, what he's doing is he's saying, think out of the box. Let's think out of the box.
Some people say it's throwing out the box.
Some people say it's throwing out the box. I think it's, but in a way, and I think I've seen one comment about this, he's saying, let's think about ourselves on a journey to self-reliance. So all these ideas he has, hyenas and snakes and so on, they're all about generating revenue. It's about self-reliance. So for me, that is his message. And I think it's a sensible message. It has radical ideas, but it's a sensible message.
But Professor Witty, you say you haven't seen anything radical.
Well, and again, going back to that part about the manifestos, it's not saying that the manifestos don't exist. The question is how thoughtful and how realistic are these propositions. We've seen two cycles of truly memorable manifestos, 2013, 2017. We saw President Kenyatta run in 2013, in 2017, and actually just throw away the 2013 manifesto, not even make any references to it in terms of continuity. And we've seen him govern from 2017 to now, not even paying attention to any of the ideas that he put forth there. So I think sometimes I just tend to think that they're not even worth the paper they're written on, to the extent that there's no real commitment by these people, and there's no way to hold them accountable. And again, set aside the manifestos. There is a government fiscal plan. There's so many constraints to basically executing government. I don't even know, in more developed democracies, there is a very deep conversation between the presidential candidates and the public service. Treasury, for instance, the key officers that run the bureaucracy in education, for instance, in agriculture, to basically understand what is it that we've been doing. Some of these manifestos read like this country does not even exist, that there is nothing. And these guys are basically reinventing the wheel. And that's what concerns me. But I think for Wajakoya, there's only one point that I wish the country could pay attention to in his manifesto. I think it's the 8th or 9th one, which talks about reducing the number of devolved units to 8.
Yes.
I think that to me is a very, very sensible proposition.
Yeah.
Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen and fellow citizens, devolution is a millstone on our necks. It is a very expensive enterprise. It is the most expensive way to do what we're trying to do.
And we will talk about it.
And it is totally unaccountable. It's expensive in the way that the money has been spent. And we don't even see it. Go to the counties and see the money is in recurrent expenditure. You could spend the money in different ways. Now, the biggest problem is holding the governors accountable. The county assemblies don't hold them accountable. So you can take the money, spend the money in a different way, and get real results for the citizens.
No, you don't agree?
Tom, I think we live in two different Kenyas, because this notion that counties are a drain on the budget was created by the Jubilee administration, which was essentially a voted no to the constitution, no to devolution, and refused and failed to transfer resources to the county. They transferred the minimum. At present, with a higher allocation to counties, you're talking about something like 332 billion to counties against a budget of 2.7 trillion. So how is devolution the drain on the neck of the country? The other thing around devolution is, if you look at the extent to which counties have been able to improve agriculture, for instance, during 2020, when the country stopped, agriculture was the only function that continued to sustain the economy of Kenya. Now, these are facts, these are statistics, that it was the one sector that is, where do citizens decide? And how far away do you want the decision to be from the farthest corner of Kenya? So the issue is with whether we have 47 counties. We now have the regional economic blocks that allow these counties to come together and then come up with, the economies of scale and the efficiency. So let us not deny Kenyans the ability to elect their MCA and hold their MCA to account at a level that is close enough, because we've had enough of centralized government. We want more decentralized government, but we want accountable centralized government. So I think on that, devolution is not just about economics. It has a assisted economics. If you look at even the increase in property prices, the expansion of services, devolution has assisted that. But there is also a political exercise, and there is Article 1, citizens say, self-governance. You can't have that under centralized government.
Joe, let me just jump in, because every time I jump in,
It's a debate.
Now all right, just very briefly, yes, yeah. We just want to do a check on what's happening with the registration, but it's fine. You can make that come.
Okay, so that was a light touch. I mean, I think the thing that we have seen in both of their manifestos, which I think have been interesting, is the focus on anti-corruption. Right, so that's the area that they do agree on, but their prescriptions are very different. So I think with the Agano Party, what I saw was a lot of language around, how painful, how onerous, corruption and impunity is, but very few legislative and policy prescriptions, and I guess programmatic shifts. Right. The one thing that I think is interesting there is this idea of shifting prosecutorial powers to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
So we will come and have a fuller conversation on this. I just want to remind our viewers who are watching this all across the screens in this country, we are live on TV and even online following these historic engagements that we have in this country every election cycle. And right now, many people are already arriving here, the audience being properly vetted. And I want to cross live to Kennedy Mureithi, who is standing at our registration desk just to check what's happening there. Is everybody in now? Because we'll be starting this debate in another 45 minutes or so. Kennedy, what's happening where you are?
Well, thank you, Joe, and quite an interesting panel you're having there, discussion. And here on this other side of the registration desk, there is an outpouring of Kenyans who want to watch this live, and they are already being cleared from the registration. There are hundreds of others that are being cleared from the other side where there is the main gate as they come in, and there is also a provision for where they will be sitting as they wait for them to be called on. And there is a serious number of officers who are doing this particular job as they wait to clear everybody that is coming in. But we are having their head, Madam Doris Tanui, on this side, just to give us a glimpse of what is happening and who are you clearing. Are you giving an opportunity for those people who are coming here for the first time, or it is by invite?
We are giving those who have been invited. You come here with an invitation card, and once you get here with your invitation card, we'll give you a QR card to scan with your phone, and then immediately it will tell you to register. Once you register, it syncs into our system. From there, we can be able to print these accreditation cards for them.
So when you're saying that you're coming in and you're given a QR code, does that mean that anybody else who has not received an invitation card from home will come here and receive the QR code?
No, if you have not been given an invitation card, we are not able to print for you a badge, and you cannot be allowed inside the gate.
So probably take us through this process. We are seeing that there are different desks manned by different people. Is it to cater for the different groups that have been invited? As I can see here, my camera person Brian will be showing, there is the embassies, there is the Media Owners Association and all that. Then there is the delegates. Probably you could take us through this.
Yeah, from that side, we are able to handle the embassies, we are able to handle the diplomats, and then from these desks, we are accrediting everyone. People come, they sit from that side, then they will be called one by one. They go to various desks, and then they are sorted out to make it move faster.
Well, that is what we are getting, and everybody has been catered for when they make their way to this particular place. And we will, the digital?
This company is called Digital One. We are the one who are doing registration and accreditation.
Yes. Yes. And we have already seen an outpouring of people that started early in the morning as they came in. Remember, this auditorium houses about 700 people who will be coming in, and they will be watching from here. But we're also having the security team that is being manned to make sure that everybody who comes here has been vetted, and will be making sure that they come with that particular card, the invitation card that they were given, so as to make sure that the security is smoothless. Hello, madam.
Jambo wa Kenya, jambo wageni. Hapa ni sub-county ya Lang'ata, na huyu ni kamanda mkuu wa polisi eneo hili la Lang'ata, Miss Monica Kimani, na nataka kuambia mambo ya usalama. Tumeweka usalama ambao ni nzuri sana. Kuna sehemu 4 za ukaguzi, kuna main gate, kuna hapa mahali mnaona registrations, kuna pale chini na kwenye auditorium. Kwa hivyo security ni nzuri sana, na tunaomba delegates wale wamealikwa wawe very cooperative kwa sababu ya usalama wao na usalama wa wageni pia ambao tuko na wao kwa wingi.
Well, you're talking about the security that has been enhanced. Probably you will tell us the number of people that are coming in, and the number of security officers that you've placed here, just to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Thank you. We have over 100 police officers within this compound, and many others outside this compound. We have both in civics and in uniform, and so there is no reason to get worried. We are up to the task.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Just before I get back to you, we'll also want to get a view from one of the delegates who have come here. As we do know that there are those delegates that are also representing the political parties that are involved in this debate. There are those supporters that have come with the 4 presidential candidates that we do expect will be involved in today's debate. We would want to get probably a view from one of them. How are you, sir?
I'm very fine.
What is your name, and today you're here, and how is the feeling, and why not watch from home and come here today?
Basically, my name is Samo Gutu. Basically, I want to say I'm one of the few delegates that are privileged to come and have a one-on-one interaction with the presidential candidates. I'm here basically to hear them out, to hear their agenda, and probably make an informed decision come 9th of August during the elections.
Thank you, Joe. Those are some of the expectations that most of the people are having today, as they hope that today, when these candidates go on the floor, they will make their submissions, and with those moderators that we are having, will be able to interrogate some of these positions that they have put out there, and that decision probably will be made. There is a huge number of undecided Kenyans that are yet to make their decision, and there are those that will be willing to cement their positions today when these debates go on. Right now, I take it back to you, Joe, to continue with your panel discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Kennedy Morezi. They are speaking to various people involved in the registration. We've seen security people there. We've even seen some of the delegates who are arriving, and that is to say that the debate is just minutes away now. At 5:30, that's when the first debate kicks off between Professor George Wajakoya. We've seen him here already. That is of the Roots Party, and their Ghana presidential candidate, David Wahiga Mwaure. And I have my panel here. They are still here. They haven't left. And as we were talking, there was a whole conversation about Wajakoya and his federal system sort of proposal. And then there was a bit of fireworks flying here. I was almost getting my helmet, but still I had you making a sound likely to suggest you wanted to say something.
Yes, you had me right, Joe.
Yes.
On the issue of Wajakoya's proposals on devolution, I agree with Wanjiru in regard to caution in terms of how we deal with the issue of devolution, but particularly because for me the wastage is across all levels. It's both at the national level and also at the county level. And obviously, there's a question around accountability. That
some people say we devolved all the bad manners to.
Yes, we did. We did devolve corruption. We had warned about that many years before the county governments were formed in 2013, and I think we focused a lot on at the national level. Even when you look at our institutions responsible for addressing and oversighting in regard to accountability, they're focused at the national level. And I go back to the question around resourcing for our institutions which are responsible for oversight. And we talked about this when we're talking about IBC, but it's not just IBC. When you go to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the ODPP, the judiciary as well, which is responsible for, is at the last point of the criminal justice chain in terms of listening and hearing and determining, adjudicating corruption cases, they do not have adequate resources to be able to fully perform their mandate to our satisfaction. And you can see that the problem of corruption is quite huge. I think right now as we speak, we are experiencing the highest cost of corruption. But we have not matched our institutions to the resources that are required. But if I can also just speak to the issues around what these candidates have in their manifestos in regard to addressing corruption. Wajakoya talks about the death penalty.
Yes, hanging people.
Yes, I'm a bit cautious on this because we also know that we're in a country which respects the right to life. Life is, when you look at our constitution and our laws, and for me, I've always questioned that. Okay, I've seen other countries which do this, but then in that case, you're not really. We want those people alive to get the real punishment in prison. I want the person who was recently was it 2 years ago, someone was sentenced to 67 years in prison. I want them to spend 67 years in prison.
Well, it's running for election, but that's a story for another day.
That's a story for here. We'll talk about it as well, because we need to hold our leaders accountable for these people who are coming to debate here and telling us that they are fighting corruption, but they are still giving tickets to people responsible for corruption, and then you tell us that you want to fight corruption with people who have been responsible for corruption. Those are the things we need to call out some of these people for. But so I question Wajakoya's proposal on this. And then for Maure, you've seen that as you've said, his emphasis is on recovery of assets, which is important, because I've not seen people talking about monies that we have lost, billions of shillings stashed out there in foreign countries. I saw that you already wrote a letter to some foreign governments asking for support in terms of, tracing and repatriating that money back into our economy. This is important. Not very many people are talking about this because we are struggling as a country with our economy, inflation, and we really this is the time we need all those resources that have been stashed out there to be brought back to be able to, bolster our economy. So I agree with him on that. He's also talked about revisiting some long-lasting corruption cases, KEMSA, the Kenren and NYS and others which have not been resolved. I think this is important. Just be cautious as well.
There's always
cautious because even as president, we also expect that he will respect independent institutions.
Exactly, because
the institutions responsible for investigation.
That's where I was going
and prosecution.
With that. How viable then is it for a candidate to really come and tell us this is what I'm going to do about corruption? I mean, in the face of what you're talking about, because we have the EACC, we have the DCI, all of this DPP, everybody doing their bit within this whole chain. What is the president going to do? I mean, the current president famously said, some people now say infamously, munataka nifanye nini jameni?
Well, there's a role that the executive also has to play. That is important. Even in terms of, because one of the things that we have struggled in this country is political will, and even just, how are you able to call out your people in government, your colleagues in government who are responsible for corruption? One of the promises of the Jubilee administration 10 years ago was that they would ensure that people who have been indicted for corruption do not hold public office. But then how many people have we seen continue in public office even after being indicted? So those are some of the things that we see. So it's a political will that is really critical that we need to see coming from the presidency. And there are many other roles that the presidency plays in terms of fighting corruption without necessarily going into the mandate and influencing independent institutions.
Then is there are platforms here. So they are For Wajakoya, the most outstanding thing about fighting corruption is, of course, kunyonga hao, which Sheila has a more complicated name for the death penalty or capital and whatever, but it's really kunyonga watu, isn't it?
With him. He said going to hang them with him.
Yes, but then there are the other things that the Ghana presidential candidate is proposing, such as the whole asset recovery thing. In fact, he's saying that asset recovery thing should be domiciled in the presidency. He's already written some letters to some foreign embassies and that sort of thing. He's talking about devolving budgeting to village councils, which is not just about corruption, but I guess it's also some of the things that Wanjiru was talking about, taking everything closer to the people. And then talking about the big fish going about.
Budgeting at the national level or at the county level?
At the village.
Devolving it beyond the
village.
Cascading it further to the villages.
So that is devolved funds going to the villages to make budget proposals about their priorities.
Yeah,
like they do in Makueni.
Yeah,
That's how they do
because
their
his
budgeting.
proposal one of the proposals, at least on devolution, is that the allocation to the counties will be 40%. Right now, of course, there's a whole debate whether it is even 15 or 12 or 10. We really don't know many times, but he's saying he's going to make it 40, and 10 out of the 40 is going to go directly to this, this village councils that he's talking about.
It's easier said than done, because you see, we already have the sub-units within counties, the sub-counties. And in the current constitution, and what has not been instituted, has been the further devolution below the county level to the sub-counties and below, where you'd go to a ward, for instance, and then have a ward council or a ward forum that basically talks about those priorities. But that envelope has to be allocated by the county assembly. That is the process. There has to be a legislative process that basically looks at the entire pie and then further allocates that, and then at that sub-county, sub-ward level, then you can now talk about ward priorities. Otherwise, the whole thing becomes very unwieldy. And then what is the level of preparedness, preparation, training, capacity building for villagers to be able to do this? I think sometimes we need to be very careful of this fantastical thinking, because this is serious stuff.
But it's happening. It's happening. And sorry to jump in. When we talk about decentralization of the budgeting process, it's happened in Makueni. And there are models that we can look at, such as Makueni, where budgeting process starts at the, in fact, sub-village, in terms of prioritization, and they then have a process of putting together those proposals, and then at the ward level you have ward kind of budgeting meetings. So if the governor wants to do a county-wide large infrastructure project like national government did SGR, or they want to build a hospital or something, they have to go to these ward level meetings and convince villagers, give us this priority because it will help you. So you have a deliberative budgeting process that is well thought out, that is based on structures that are not just set up for the budgeting process, but that exist and have other roles. Linked to that, before
but isn't there a need for that continuous capacity building for them?
They have a whole, exactly, it's political will.
Not the numbers like how many shillings and cents you're going to spend on a bridge.
No, yeah. It is, by the way, the budget discussion is based on the proposals, because there is a problem in Kenya's budgeting process, and we've been told this by government, by people in